Hello everyone, Miss Carol here. Thanks for joining me again as we continue our story of the Israelites entering into the Promised Land. As you remember, they have a new leader now, Joshua, and so he's about to take them across that Jordan River. If you remember last week though, he had sent out 2 spies to go and check out the city of Jericho, and just to see what the walls were like, how protected it was. And they went to the house of a woman named Rahab to stay the night. But if you remember, the king found out that there were 2 spies in town, and he had heard they were staying at the house of Rahab. And as I told you, my Bible says she may have been an innkeeper. So she heard somehow, I think, that they were coming, because the Bible says that she hid them, didn't she? So when they knocked on her door and demanded that the men be brought out to them, she said, well, indeed, 2 men did come to stay the night, but they left out the city gate before dark. And I don't know where they went. But if you chase after them, who knows? You might actually find them. You might catch up with them. And so they rushed through the gate, didn't they, to go and try to find those spies. And remember, what she had done was to take them on top of her roof and hide them. And remember that her house was against the wall of the city, right there. And so she went to them and told them, okay, you've been discovered. The king knows you're here, so you need to leave. You need to get out of here. But here's the thing that I want from you. I know, and let me just read to you what she says in the Bible. The Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. We don't know how she knew that, but she had just heard of everything that had happened and how their God had been with them, and she just believed that he was not an idol. He was a true God. And so she told them, she wanted to make a deal, didn't she? If I save your life, and I think I did, then I want you to save my life and my parents and my brothers and sisters and their family. If you'll save us. And they said, sure, we'll do that. Our lives for your life. She said, all right. So she let them down from her window with a scarlet cord, a red cord, a rope. And they said, as long as you've brought into your home everybody that you want saved, and as long as you've tied this red cord outside your window, when we come and take the city over, we're going to make sure that you're saved. We promise you. And so they go back to tell Joshua what happened, don't they? And if you remember, instead of saying, they could have gone back and said, well, the king, they already knew we were spies. Oh, they know we're coming. We can't go. But no. This new generation of Israelites, they didn't say that. They said to Joshua, the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us. So they're positive. No, we can do this. We can do it. So let's begin reading in Joshua chapter 3. And it says, early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the priests who are Levites carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Then Joshua told the people, get ready, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And Joshua said to the priest, take up the ark of the covenant and cross over ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. So you tell the priest who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." And Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out all the peoples of this land. See the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth? He will go into the Jordan ahead of you. And then when you set foot in the Jordan, as soon as the priest carrying the ark set foot in the Jordan, the water flowing downstream will be cut off, and they will stand up in a heap." So the people broke camp to cross the Jordan. The priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap in a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan. And my Bible tells me that was about 30 miles upstream from them. 30 miles. So God caused the river to back up 30 miles above them. And when it was flowing, the water flowing down to the Dead Sea from where they were, it was cut off completely. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing, isn't it? And so, when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priest stood, and to carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you are to stay the night. Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone and carry it with you." So Joshua, the Israelites did as Joshua commanded, and they took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of Israel, just as the Lord had told them. And they carried them over with them to their camp. Now, as the priest who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan, until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. The people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed, the ark of the Lord and the priests came to the other side, while the people watched. And the men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they were the ones that chose their land on the other side of the Jordan, right? They crossed over armed in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them. About 40,000 of them, armed and ready for battle, crossed over before the Lord's ark. And that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they revered him all the days of his life, just as they had Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests carrying the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priest, "Come up out of the Jordan." And the priests came up out of the river carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. No sooner had their feet set on dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place, as it was running at flood stage as before. And on the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. They are now in the promised land. And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. And he said to the Israelites, and I want to show you a picture too while I'm at it. Look at that. All right, so there they are getting ready to cross over the Jordan. But the minute that those priests carrying that ark set their foot in the Jordan River, it stopped flowing all 30 miles upstream. And all the way downstream it stopped flowing, and they walked across on dry ground. That's right. So Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones that they had taken out of the middle of the Jordan River, one for each tribe. And he said to the Israelites, in the future, when your children ask, what do these stones mean? You tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan just what he did to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us as we crossed over out of Egypt. He did this so all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, this is a really good statement in Joshua chapter 5, verse 1. Now, when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the seacoast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over, their hearts sank, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. All right, so now they're already scared. They're already worried, aren't they? They're thinking, oh my goodness, they're coming. What are we going to do? And then it says, on the evening of the 14th day of the first month, while they were camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. Now think about this. This group hasn't celebrated the Passover because remember, the first Passover was exactly the same time in the first month, and we said their first month is March or April. And that was the night, wasn't it, that the death angel passed over them while they were in Egypt? And they celebrated that first Passover. And then remember, they celebrated the second Passover a year later while they were at Mount Sinai, just before they left Mount Sinai. And as far as I can tell, this is only the third time they will have ever celebrated the Passover, and this is a whole new generation celebrating. And how interesting, too, don't you think, that they crossed over the Red Sea right after Passover. And here they are, over 40 years later, finally crossing the Jordan into that promised land just around Passover time. I tell you, dates mean something to the Lord. They really do. So the day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, some of the food and fruits and all from the land they had been wanting so badly. They had unleavened bread and roasted grain. And the manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, because that year they ate the food of Canaan. So 40 years later, they no longer need that manna, do they? They're no longer in that wilderness. They're in that promised land flowing with milk and honey. And so God stops their manna from then on. Now, when Joshua was near Jericho, this picture shows him a little too close as far as I'm concerned. I don't think he was quite that close, but when he was near Jericho, he looked up and he saw, and by the way, that looks pretty intimidating, doesn't it? Look at Jericho, the tall walls. How are they ever going to get in there to fight those men? How are they ever going to do it? And Joshua looked up and saw a man standing in front of him. He had a sword in his hand. And Joshua went up to him and he asked, "Are you for us or are you for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied. "But as commander of the army of the Lord, I now have come." Wow. The commander of the army of the Lord. So then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence. and asked, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." And Joshua did so. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. Do you think that sounds familiar? Take your sandals off because you're standing on holy ground. Where have we heard that before? Oh yeah, remember? When Moses went to take a better look at the burning bush when he was in Midian? Yeah. And he heard the Lord say, "Take off your sandals. The ground you're standing is holy ground." So this could be Jesus. We don't know, right? In the form of the commander of the Lord's army, we don't know, but we know it's holy ground. Who's ever standing there? So now it says, now this is interesting. Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. They had closed the gates. No one was allowed in, and no one was allowed out because they were worried. Already 2 spies had gotten in, right? They didn't want to let the Lord's army in. No way. Those Israelites. Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I told you I think the commander of the army was the Lord. "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. And when you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go up, and every man can go straight in." What? Is that all they're supposed to do? That's what God said. In other words, God's going to do the fighting, isn't he? He's the one that's going to fight for them. All right, and so Joshua, the son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the people, "Advance! March around the city with the armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord." And when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priest who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. And all this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the people, "Do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. And then shout." So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the people returned to camp and spent the night there. Now let's just think about that. Now, these people in Jericho, they've been ready. They know, oh, they're coming. We're ready. We're not letting anybody in or out. But I don't think they expected to see priests with an ark of the covenant of the Lord and trumpets blowing. And do you think they were ready, armed, ready to just, okay, we're going to take you guys out, look out. But they didn't attack them. What did they do? They just marched around the city blowing their trumpets. And then they left. Well, that had to be weird, huh? That wasn't at all what they were expecting. So, Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. And they did this exactly for 6 days. 6 days. So the next morning, can you imagine? They thought, uh-oh, this is the day. Now they're going to attack us. And what'd they do? They just marched around it. Blew those trumpets. I don't know. maybe on the third or fourth day, what do you think they were thinking? Were they just so scared they thought, I can't stand this. This is making me a nervous wreck. What are they going to do? Are they going to attack or not? Or maybe some people thought, look at them. We thought they were powerful. I think they're just scared. They're afraid to come attack us. I'm just going to go ahead and sit here with my cup of tea and just ignore them. I don't know. I imagine there were a lot of different feelings going on inside that city of Jericho. I imagine so. But on the seventh day, they got up at daybreak and they marched around the city. All right, this time they didn't march around that city once and go home. Nope, they marched around it again, a second time, and then a third time, and then a fourth time, and then a fifth time, and then a sixth time, and then a seventh time. Oh boy. Now, if you hadn't been a little nervous before, I think you'd be really nervous now. Like, what's going on? Wait a minute here. Things are changing. And the seventh time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies that we sent. So when the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, the people gave a shout, a loud shout, and that wall collapsed. Do you think the wall collapsed because the people shouted so loud? Do you think the wall collapsed because the trumpets blew so loudly? I think the walls collapsed because God caused them to. God's power collapsed those walls, didn't it? And because why? Because they did it exactly as God had said. And do you notice something about this picture that I noticed? Do you see a red cord, a scarlet cord hanging out a window? Now, isn't that what they told Rahab she had to do? Hang that scarlet rope out of your window, and we won't hurt anybody in there when we see that. So every man charged straight in, and they took the city. And they devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it. But Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, go into Rahab's house and bring her out and all who belong to her, just as you promised her. So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, and her brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family, and they put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men that Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among them, the Israelites, to this day. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. All right, so they have crossed over. Not only have they crossed over, but they've succeeded in taking over a city, entirely an important city, I think. And they saved the life of Rahab. And this is not the only time we're going to hear about Rahab, because we learned that she marries an Israelite man named Salmon, and they have a child, and that child has a child, and we're going to talk more about how important all that is, because it comes into the family of Christ if you go all the way down through Joseph. All right. Wow, finally, after all this time, 40-something years, they're in the promised land. And now they got a lot of work to do, don't they? They got a lot of fighting to do to take that land over. But God's going to be with them. Let's find out next week where they go from here. All right, I hope you're having a good week. And I hope you're being the best that you can be. We love you and we miss you. Bye-bye.